I think we're ready to go. Hey, tubers, this is Galactic Storyteller. We've got an exciting interview today. Usually at the end of my videos, I will ask you guys to, when you make comments, be polite, provide facts and references. Today, I'm going to ask you to take that a step further. We are going to be talking today with our special guest, Jennifer Guskin, who recently has had her child legally kidnapped by Child Protective Services. She's been targeted for a particular reason. She does have an MK Ultra mind control background, and of course they want control of her baby now. So when you guys make comments, I'm going to ask you to show compassion and respect, even if you have a differing opinion. This is an opportunity for us to continue to learn. But more than that, it's an opportunity for us to get Jennifer's story out there so that hopefully we can shine a greater light on this issue of child kidnapping and help her get her little baby Iris back, who is only 7 months old. So Jennifer, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. How are you doing through all of this?
As well as can be expected. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. These are always sensitive topics, so I want to make sure that as we proceed through this information, we do so in a very compassionate and empathic way. I think our society has grown very apathetic towards other people, and I'm on the other end of that spectrum, and I know some of my viewers are as well. They've expressed that, so I think that you've got a very, as far as the internet goes, a very safe place for you to share your story, and hopefully we can help get Iris back a little bit sooner, because I think the law says they need to have her in custody 15 months, 18 months before parental rights are terminated. Is that correct?
I think it's about 18 months.
Okay. All right. So Iris was taken April 25th of this last year. Do you want to explain a little bit about her circumstances and why they medically kidnapped her?
Well, Iris was born at home on December 29th, and she wasn't gaining weight as quickly as she was supposed to. We took her to 3 different pediatricians to try and find out why she wasn't gaining weight, and all of them said to give her the bottle. And we would try to give her the bottle, but she wouldn't take it. She would just chew on the nipple. So I kept breastfeeding her, but she wasn't gaining weight as quickly as she should. On April 6th, the CPS came to try and take her, but I live streamed that whole ordeal. During the live stream, a lot of people recommended having her checked for a tongue and lip tie, which is an extra piece of skin under the tongue and under the lip that causes a baby to burn more calories and not gain weight while breastfeeding. So we took her to a specialist on April 9th who diagnosed and treated her for the tongue and lip ties.
Oh, so she did have that.
Yes, she had both. She was diagnosed and treated for both.
Okay. I have a friend down the street whose baby just went through that 2 months ago. And it was incredibly stressful because she was feeding him on demand and he wasn't gaining weight.
I pretty much spent the first 6 months sitting Indian style on my bed with her in my lap. If she wasn't sleeping or eating, I was playing with her. She was attached to me for 3 months, feeding whenever she wanted, feeding constantly. And I was fine with that. I actually really had no problem with that at all. But they kept getting on my case about she's not gaining weight, she's not gaining weight. They said to feed her the bottle or to stop feeding her on demand as well. They said to feed her every 2 to 3 hours rather than on demand. So
well, she can't latch onto your nipple. She can't latch onto a bottle.
Well, from what I understand, the thing with tongue and lip tie, and the reason why the bottle helps is because the nipple goes so far into the mouth that the tongue and lip tie doesn't really become a problem.
Okay. Go ahead.
So they wanted me to feed her every 2 to 3 hours rather than on demand. And when I did feed her every 2 to 3 hours, she stopped gaining weight altogether. So when this happened to the first pediatrician, I said, she's not gaining weight at all anymore. Can I please go back to feeding her on demand? No, keep feeding her every 2 to 3 hours. And I ended up dropping that pediatrician, went to a different one who gave the exact same recommendations, dropped her, went to another one who gave the exact same recommendations. And then we saw the specialist who treated her. On the 12th, we went back to the pediatrician again to kind of keep an eye on her weight, and she had actually lost an ounce because she didn't want to eat because of the soreness from the surgery. So we brought her to Greater Baltimore Medical Center on April 12th. Her blood work was more or less normal. It was a little bit off, but not dangerous or anything. On April 20th, we had trialed a supplemental nursing system, which is a bottle that drapes over the mother's shoulder and a tube comes down onto the mother's nipple so the baby can get both formula and breast milk at the same time. And she reluctantly took that. So on April 23rd, we had a meeting with GBMC staff about Iris's discharge, and we had agreed to everything, except that we weren't allowed to leave until CPS approved us to leave. So on April 25th, CPS comes in and says, you didn't agree to the discharge plan, takes her and kicks us out of the hospital.
Just right there. No warning.
No warning.
And she had had the lip tie surgery.
She had had it done on
you had taken care of everything that your doctors had asked you to do.
Yes. We had even bought a supplemental nursing system on Amazon just to show them that, hey, look, we've got our own system. We're good to go.
And just for the record, my friend down the street did the very same thing. She used one, it's a tiny little bitty cord that comes through and you slip it in the corner of their mouth so they don't even know it's there.
Right. She didn't really care much for it, but she took it. We weren't able to leave the hospital until they found something that she would take because she wasn't taking the bottle. And then on April 25th, they come in and say, you didn't agree to the discharge plan. We're taking her.
Okay, so you just showed me a couple of minutes ago a medical record showing her blood work. This was the day before she was kidnapped, correct?
The first one that I'll show you is the day that she was admitted to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one is the day she was admitted to the hospital. You can see one of the numbers here are off. And CPS's accusation is that we were starving her and that she was extremely malnourished. So these are the numbers of her in our care. The highlighted area is the one that is not within the preference range for her age group.
Is it a severe drop in numbers or is it just slightly off? Because those can be subjective.
Well, the preference age for her BUN ratio is 4 to 18. Her value for her BUN was 23.3. So it was, I guess, a decent amount off. That's, I certainly acknowledge that. And then the blood work from the day after CPS took her. So this was taken on April 26th. And you can see here, there are 8 numbers that are off.
Right.
So if her blood work on the 12th was neglect, what is this?
Exactly. That's shocking. But then knowing what I know about CPS, it's not shocking. Back in the Clinton administration, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's when Child Protective Services was really starting to become federally funded. So now CPS has a quota, depending on your town, how many people there are. Each month, they have a quota to take, whether it's 5 infants, 30 toddlers. They have an age bracket that every city and state is required to take these children into their custody so that they can meet their federal funding demands. Were you aware of that?
I didn't know that. I knew that they received bonuses for the children that they adopted out. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that they had quotas to fill.
They do, and it's different from city to city. Now, I will tell you that it's not just about the federal funding there, because their ultimate goal is to get these kids on pharmaceutical drugs. They mess up their minds. It splits up husband and wife because they're required to have their own attorneys, and it just keeps snowballing so that the goal is to continue to take these kids, not have them bond with their parents, and then 15 months down the road, and it might be 15, 18, depending on what city you're in.
Right.
15.
I think it depends on the county and everything.
Adopt them out.
Right.
So it's a big trafficking issue. Tell me where you're at with things legally right now with getting Iris back.
Well, we are supposedly in the reunification phase. We were given liberal supervised visitation, which more or less meant whenever we want to see her, we can see her. But on June 20th, the foster care supervisor at CPS, Ben Levin, called us to say, well, we're cutting your visitation down to 1 hour a week.
So how is a parent supposed to bond with their child 1 hour a week if their goal was to reunite the family? How can they do that?
And they also prohibited her from being breastfed. She's not allowed to be breastfed either. They've given no reason why. They won't even tell me what doctor made this call. They're just saying you're not allowed to breastfeed her, not answering any questions.
So when you visit her, you can't go through that natural
Nope.
breastfeeding bonding motion.
She's not allowed to be breastfed at all. We can see her for 1 hour a week, and it has to be supervised. It's in the libraries, and unfortunately, the person who has her right now is Scott, my boyfriend, husband, her father's mother, and she doesn't care for me. She has admitted to having people follow us around. We've had people harassing us on the streets. Um, I've been accused of starving Iris, but you can see in these medical records, yes, there was a number off, and that's obviously not okay, but you can see the difference between when she was in our care compared to CPS's care.
And a lot of children, when they're born, their bilirubin count is off, and you just kind of have to take a look at their particular birthing situation and make those adjustments. So to me, that doesn't ring any alarms.
And the thing was she was very, very, very active. She loved attention, was always interacting, very, very alert. She developmentally, even in the medical record, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The only thing she was behind on was her weight. So they literally had no reason at all to go after her to the extent that they have. We even have in the medical records where the doctors say that they had, quote, ongoing non-transparent conversations with DSS about Iris and her family. So they weren't even being honest with Iris's doctors.
What was her birth weight?
5 pounds, 12 ounces.
Oh, so she's tiny. 5 pounds,
And
12 ounces. Okay. And what was the weight when they took her?
oh,
Just roughly?
she was gaining weight by that point. She was probably about 6 or 7 pounds. I'm not 100% sure on that, but she was gaining weight. We had figured out, she was gaining weight. Everything was going great medically.
Yeah.
She was fine. And then they come in and are like, you didn't agree to the discharge plan, even though I have text messages and proof showing that we did.
Yeah.
They took her.
So let's talk about Scott and his mom. Obviously, I don't really know Scott. I don't want to speak for him, but you feel like you can talk about the relationship with his mom?
To a degree. I'm not going to.
Okay. Okay. How are things between him and his mom if she's been the instigator in all of this?
Well, initially things were great. We were very gracious. We were very grateful, that she came in and that she stepped up. But before this whole thing happened, he's not a very social person in general. His mother, wants him to be that perfect son who's always there, and he's just not that person. And I tried to. It caused fights with how much I was trying to get him to reach out to his mom and spend time with his family, and he just wanted nothing to do with it. And I eventually gave up and didn't even want to. Since this whole thing has started, since he caught her lying to one of Iris's doctors, he really wants nothing to do with her anymore. Right now he's in a state of, when I get Iris back, I want nothing to do with my family ever again.
Wow. Okay. And how does the rest of the family feel about this whole situation?
I don't really know. The issue that we've had with the rest of his family is that whenever he and his mother have a disagreement, his sister comes in and starts berating him and piling on him and just talking poorly to him, and never lets him get a word in edgewise. So I feel bad because he has two nephews and a niece, and he hasn't spent any time with them or anything. Unfortunately, they're having to deal with the backlash from everything that's going on with the adults in their family. But it's a situation where unfortunately everybody seems to be listening to his mother. Nobody cares about the medical records. His mother is in a CPS said. I know the medical records say, but CPS said, and that's that.
So you guys aren't even allowed to sneak little visits. I mean, this
No,
is Scott's mom, and he can't go over there and just hold Iris for a while?
well, the thing is his mother has the vendetta against me personally. I've told him multiple times, if you want to go over there, see Iris before you go to work, or when you get off of work, or some other times, then go over. And he's like, no, I want to be supportive of you. It's like, but Iris is more important.
Yeah.
So that's, once again, though, he's an adult. He's able to make those decisions on his own.
Yeah.
But, it's a difficult situation because she is not the same. She is not as happy. She's not as interactive. She's not as active anymore. She's behaviorally, we can tell she's not the same child anymore. She's not getting the same attention she should be.
Do you think she's in a nurturing environment? Obviously not the one that you guys can and should be providing.
Every time we've gone there, before this whole thing happened, Iris was laying on the floor. There was, a play mat out, and she's laying on the play mat and all that kind of stuff. But his mom was on the couch on her phone, and Iris was just laying on the floor by herself. And then every time we see her now in the library, she's got a new scratch on her somewhere. Her diaper's dirty. She has a rash or something. And she never had a rash when she was with us. She never had a bruise with us. She never had a scratch with us.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's something happening there where she is not getting properly taken care of.
Since when do you do visitation at a library? That's the kind of place where you have to be quiet. That's not,
That's where they want to bring an infant.
Okay, that's a little bit weird. But let's talk a little bit about why you think Iris is targeted, because this really is probably a secondary issue about Iris. This has more to do with your background, you feel. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she was directly targeted because of my past.
Okay. Now, just for the viewer's sake, Jennifer does have a YouTube channel where she goes through some of her background and keeps you posted on what's happening currently with Iris. So if you want to give them your YouTube channel so they can follow you a little bit more and keep up with the story, what is it?
My YouTube channel is A Human Experiment.
Okay. Okay, excellent. And that is in reference to your background as an MK Ultra mind control victim, correct?
I was specifically an experiment itself, not necessarily what most people go through with the typical MK Ultra programming.
Okay.
I was actively experimented on, genetically brought into, boated off onto islands off of Long Island's coast, and brought into facilities and experimented on there, like with like laboratories and stuff like that.
Okay, so this would be the equivalent of the Montauk Project with the Montauk boys. Were you mixed in with boys and girls? Were you a part of the Montauk girls?
I don't really know if I was so much as part of the Montauk Project itself, but most of the people I was around were females. I didn't really run across many boys. There were a couple here and there, but mainly the people I were around were girls. But even then, I didn't really, during the active experimentation part, I wasn't really around many other people. I was usually by myself, in a degree of seclusion. And then the only time I was really around other people was during the parties, which is what most people know about, or the pizza parties.
Okay, okay. And so we don't really need to go into Pizzagate and what that entails, because I think anybody who's done just a smidge of research should understand what goes on there. But when you were a baby, you were put into an adoptive situation specifically for the experimentation. So this was planned out before your birth, correct?
I don't know to what extent it was planned out before my birth, but I know that that was part of the arrangement of my adoption.
Okay. Part of the arrangement. So your biological parents knew full well, or
I don't know how much they knew. For all I know, I could have been a situation like Iris, where I was taken from a good family, and you know, for all I know, that could have been my situation.
Okay, but the parents who adopted you, that was part of the agreement.
Yes.
Okay, that the powers that be, whoever they are, would have access to you.
Yes.
Okay. When is your first memory? Whether it's good, bad, indifferent, how far back do you feel like your memory goes with accuracy?
I remember standing in my crib as a child. I remember just kind of standing there, or one of the favorite things I used to do is I used to kind of just lay down in my crib and stare out the window and look at the sky and watch the planes and everything going by, the clouds, the trees. That's probably my earliest memory.
Do you have any feelings attached to that? Was it indifference, or did you feel like maybe you were happy in those moments?
I love those moments. I've always loved looking at the sky and all that. That always made me really happy.
Okay. Well, that's excellent because it's so important to have good memories as well because you've been bombarded with the opposite. When is your first memory do you recall with accuracy of abuse?
I don't know exactly when it is, but I guess I don't know how to explain it, but I remember initially as a very, very small child being raped, and I was so small that like they used to hold me up by my waist or my chest, my hips, and raise and lower me on them. And
Yeah.
then as it progressed, I had, my feet on the ground, and then I had one knee on the ground and one foot on the ground, and then both my knees on the ground. And kind of like as I grew and as I got
Yeah.
bigger, so the earliest I remember being raped was, I don't know how old I was, but I was small enough that they had to physically hold me up and lift me up and down on them.
Okay. Now, was this from your biological parents or is this from the people that they gave access to you?
This,
Oh, Jennifer, we've lost connection here. Hold on, everybody, just a second. Sometimes this happens when you're talking about subject matter that they do not want out there. So we're going to do our best here a second. We're going to write it out. And if we need to reconnect, we absolutely will. Notice she was just getting into the information of the past and whether it was her biological family or her adoptive family versus the people that had access to her. And we're going to talk about those government people in just a few moments. Okay, it looks like uh, she was kicked out. If you'll give us just a minute, I apologize about that. We'll see if we can get her back. I know I'm on video here, guys. I'm going to send her another invite. Stick with me real quick. And we'll see if we can get her back. Okay, guys, I sent her an invite. We'll see what we can do here. And if not, we will have to do a part 2. Okay. All right, guys. Not sure where to go from here. We may have to just restart. Okay, guys, you know what? Stay tuned for part 2, and I will see if I can pull out a technology miracle in connecting the two somehow. If somebody is a tech expert, wants to help me with my technical stuff, I would really be interested in that. So like and subscribe, leave your respectful comments down below, and we will pick up with part 2. Okay, guys, we're back. Sorry about that. We had a little technical issue, but we are moving on and picking up with Iris's memories of her abuse. Was it your adoptive parents or somebody else?
Well, with this particular memory or series of memories, I'm still, what part of what they put me through is that they implanted false memories to cover up what they were actually doing to me.
Yes.
So a lot of this particular scenario where I was growing up and having the abuse happen was right now in my memory, it actually takes place in the living room of my grandparents' house, but I'm not 100% sure of the accuracy of that. So I'm still trying to figure that out. It feels accurate, but I'm not 100% sure. But
And just for the viewer's sake, what happens when they do trauma-based mind control and they are splitting the mind and compartmentalizing, creating these alters through the sexual and the physical torture? One aspect of the mind doesn't recognize or remember or have any knowledge of another aspect of the trauma. And so when those memories start to happen, you get what's called bleed through. And if they've implanted false memories, that can be extra tricky to figure out what's real and what's not. And I've worked with many MK victims that as they start to recall, they're actually programmed to have their hands or their legs go on fire, or maybe they have a sensation of their faces melting. I know I've got a family member that when he starts to recall, he's thrown immediately into seizures, or has splitting headaches to the point where now the focus is on the physical pain rather than the memory. So it's a mechanism they use specifically to keep you from the memories. Okay, so you, I'm sure, know this, but some of the viewers may not. So right now you're in the middle of trying to figure out what's real.
right, I've gotten, usually when I get the quote unquote fake memories, usually I can tell it's fake, but it's one of those
Oh,
situations where, I mean, luckily I can tell that it's fake because, for example, like scenarios that never should happen would happen in my Hebrew school room or something like that. It'll take place in a weird situation
okay.
where I just know that it wasn't there, and then eventually it'll start to come in clearer, and I'll realize, okay, that's really where it happened. But overall, yeah, I'm still working on that. That's also part of why I don't really, put out a lot of videos and stuff, because I want to make sure that what I'm remembering is accurate and not the fake memories, blended in with the real ones.
Okay, so what was the purpose of your specific programming? Have you been able to figure that out as to why it was you they were targeting?
Um, well, from what I understand, I don't know much about the Montauk Project experiments and stuff like that. But from what I do remember, I was brought in to sit in on a lot of meetings with diplomats and, military officials and, politicians and stuff like that. And I was used as a degree of a human lie detector, where I would sit in on these meetings, and they would, ask me how I felt, if I felt they were being honest, what they were, all that kind of stuff. And I was used for that partially. There are other things that I feel like I was used for, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm still working on clearing that up. But I think, to a degree, it had with a little bit of astral projection or remote viewing, stuff like that. I was put in like water tanks and stuff like that as well. So it's difficult to talk about, especially with Iris not being here. I'm afraid to say anything and they're going to be like, oh my God, she's crazy. So
Yeah.
it's,
Well, don't put any information out that could inhibit your ability to get Iris back. So you be in charge of that. Do
yeah,
you
I'm being very
know
careful with that.
what was that?
Pardon?
Do
I
you
said I'm
know
being very,
do you know
go
who
ahead.
some of your handlers were? Do you recall any people's names or faces that you feel comfortable saying?
There was one person who I don't know if he was my handler per se, But if I lost it, if I went out of control, if I, lost my temper and went ballistic, he would be brought in and I would almost immediately pacify. There were a couple of situations where I remember, it didn't work, and then, he had to come in and my mom had to come in and then I pacified. But he is he's not exactly family. We call him my uncle, but he's not actually my uncle. It's through extension.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, a lot of victims that have gone through this, they have an uncle. So that's very typical. Do you feel comfortable saying his name? Do you know who he is? His real
I know who he is. I'm not comfortable saying his name
Okay.
in this type of venue. I'll be more than happy to tell you, out of, off of here.
Okay.
I've told a couple of people, and I think that he's been looked into and everything. So.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And so, are there figures that you remember from the government, from the military, that have made an impression on you that you do feel comfortable saying so and so was there and this is what I recall?
There's only one who I explicitly remember. That is the one whose name we don't say.
Okay.
I remember him explicitly at meetings with my grandfather, who I'm not 100% sure, but I think he was Operation Paperclip.
Okay.
So he went to my grandparents' house more than once and had meetings there and all that kind of stuff. I don't explicitly remember anybody else at the moment. I'm working on that.
Okay.
But
Now, what was in it for your adoptive parents? Why did they agree to this? Do you know?
well, I don't really know in detail. My father used to work for this place called McKinsey and Company, which is something that early on, I don't know if you follow Q, but early on in the Q posts, he mentioned McKinsey and Company, and that was really jarring. Um, but I don't really know how much was in it for them. I know that we traveled a lot. When I was younger, we went to a lot of countries all over the place. My dad was very fond of saying that, me and my brother were going to be his retirement and all that kind of stuff.
Because they got paid.
Yes. There were situations where I'd be brought back from whether it was a party or an experimentation, and I was expected to bring like this wad of cash and put it on their dresser before going to my room and going to bed.
So anytime you were taken for a particular reason, programming, a mission, what have you, when you returned, you had a payment for your adoptive parents.
Not every time. I just know I explicitly remember sometimes, I'd be brought in and I would, bring them the money and put it on their dresser and then go to my room.
Okay, so if you don't mind, let's see if we can bring this around back to Iris. With Scott's mom having Iris, and you feel that Iris has been targeted because of your background, is it likely that she's going to continue to stay with Scott's mom, or will she be ultimately, if you guys don't regain custody, will she be put with somebody else who is controlled?
Well, Scott's mom seems to be living under the delusion that CPS is honest. She seems to think that if we're not able to get Iris back, that she'll be able to adopt Iris or be able to be Iris's long-term foster parent. What she doesn't realize is they already have had a foster couple lined up. So odds are if they do end up taking Iris, she's probably going to end up with that other couple, not her. She's also, I don't know, maybe 60 or so. She can't exactly raise an infant by herself. So, I mean, she seems to think that she has all the control. She is not living in reality.
So she's pretty convoluted as far as her belief system and knowledge of Child Protective Services.
She seems to think she did daycare when she was younger here in the Baltimore area, which on its own has my own red flags, especially considering that we're right by DC, fairly wealthy area. I'm pretty sure she's watched the kids of, people who worked with some of the politicians and everything. So who knows if she's has some involvement in this or not. I don't know, but there have been plenty of signs that indicate that she has some sort of involvement. I don't think Iris is safe with her. I don't think Iris is safe really with anybody who CPS places her with.
Right. They're
I
not
think,
vetted very well. Some are, so that they're part of the networking system, and others are not at all. So you don't know who your child is going to and what their background is. Oh, that's really frightening. I'm so sorry you have to deal with that. What can we do at this point to help support you and Scott in getting Iris back? What needs to happen going further?
honestly, I don't know. We're supposed to have a plan for reunification. We were never given a plan for reunification. CPS is not communicating with us. They're not, they're not responding to any of our requests. They are off in their own little land doing what they want to do. I mean, we've got the supervisor go in contempt against the court order. So, I mean, at this point, they're also trying to go after us for child support.
That's their new thing recently, is going after the parents for child support, even when the child has been adopted out. They're still going back to the biologicals for child support, plus the federal funding that they get on top of that. So they're really double dipping.
Yeah, you're not, and of course, there. I spoke with somebody who said that recently statistics are like 88% of children that have been removed from their homes, were done so under false pretenses and were reunited with their family.
That would be in alignment with what I was listening to yesterday. I was listening to this woman who was an investigative reporter, and she went undercover as a foster parent. And she said at least 85% of all children taken from their parents had no grounds to do so, and were put in a situation with families that were far worse than their biological homes. And that's shocking. That's criminal.
It is, and I think that these social workers need to be arrested. They need to be charged with, fraud, perjury, endangering the welfare of a minor. They need to have, the laws thrown at them. And I think, unfortunately, and I don't want to, place blame on parents, but unfortunately, I think a big reason why it's gotten out of control to this point is that people get their children back, and they're like, all right, I got my kid back. I'm done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Rather than saying, no, the fact that this happened to me means it's going to happen to other people as well. We need to come together. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because when you pull back and when your hands are off, CPS can come back 2 years down the line and say, okay, we got an anonymous complaint. Not going to tell you from who, but it was an anonymous complaint. And I'm at the point now at this point where I think that a lot of these anonymous complaints aren't anonymous complaints. I think they're CPS agents just finding children or finding people to target, maybe something as simple as a Facebook post.
Wow, that's incredible. So even if the child is returned to their family, they can still come back a couple years down the road saying, we have these allegations towards you anonymously. We're going to take your child and then we'll investigate.
Right, exactly.
So really nobody's safe. And most people don't realize when you sign a birth certificate, you are signing your child over to the state just by signing the birth certificate. So that gives them permission to come in and take your child, because in their minds, they own your kid anyways.
Well, what most people also don't realize is that we're all of us are already owned. Our social security numbers are the equivalency of our barcodes. We are nothing more than cattle to them.
Yes, absolutely. And for those who have not looked into that, you need to, before you make comments, do your research on that one, because we are we are traded on the stock exchange via our social security number.
People are traded in bets. They're bought, sold. I've been to situations where, sorry, dogs. I've been in situations where I would specifically see them betting people. If I win, I get 500,000 Africans. If you win, you get 3,000 or 300,000 Middle Easterners, and they'll literally just bet people like that.
Where is that happening? Talk a little more about that.
The one particular memory that I have was at, I don't know. Hold on, let me let the dogs out. One second. Come on, let's go outside. Come on.
This is real life, folks. I'm excited to see what she's going to say about this, because I haven't heard of that. What's your dog's name?
I have one Diamond and the other one is Rocky.
Oh, okay, very cool. All right. So tell me a little bit about what you were saying with I'll trade you this group of people for this group.
Well, there was one particular scenario that I remember, and I don't know how it worked, but it was a chess game. And there were a lot of like the high level people, the ones that if I say their names, you're going to be deemed an anti-Semite. Um,
Okay.
and they,
A fake Hebrew. I love that.
yeah, yeah. So they would line up like these tables and have these chess matches. And I remember sitting at the feet of one of these people. And they would bet, I don't know if it was every round or every game, but there's one particular transaction that I remember they were betting 320,000 people on either the move or the winner or something like that. And they just bet people like they're nothing.
And what do they do with them? Do they export them, import them? What?
I don't really know, but I do know that each particular, I guess, ethnicity has their own uses. For example, African descent, the males were usually for hard labor. Um, Middle Eastern, a lot of organ trafficking from Middle Eastern. We have Hispanic was usually done for like the stereotypical house cleaning and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Aryan, blonde hair, blue eyes were usually for sexual reasons, stuff like that. So each like ethnicity or genetic type would usually have a particular use to them.
So I'll trade you 150,000 Asian hearts for 550,000 labor workers.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And most people don't realize that we have just in the United States over 800,000 people a year that go missing.
Yeah.
It's much bigger than the one person you see on an Amber Alert every 6 months on television. That's nothing.
And I mean, another thing also is these numbers are wildly inflated. Usually they are significantly, the numbers that we are given are significantly less than what the actual reality is.
So what do you think the reality is? Because you would have a closer pulse on that than the rest of us.
If I had to guess, I would say probably about between 1.2 and 1.5, because we also have to take into account the people that aren't reported missing.
Is this
1.2,
annually?
1.5 million. Pardon?
This is annually?
Probably, give or take. I think at this point that number's probably gone down because I know Trump is, really cracking down on the trafficking. But it's the numbers that we get or the public are given are not accurate.
And I'm glad you mentioned that with Trump because I want to say something. I live in Arizona. And so right now, people are having an absolute cow. I mean, just going ape shit over the fact that these kids that are coming in across the border with their parents are being separated. Well, there's a reason for that, folks. And the reason he's doing a DNA test is because human trafficking is so huge, and we live on a border state. And a good portion of these kids going back and forth are not being escorted by their biological parents. These are children that are being illegally taken. So,
And from what I understand, there are also a lot of children who are actually adults pretending to be children.
oh my gosh.
I,
Wow. So people who are really 18, 19, 20 that look younger?
I've seen one particular situation where there was a mid 20-year-old man who was in high school masquerading as a teenager.
Wow. So they befriend these kids, they groom them, they have a relationship, a peer type relationship, and then they pull these kids out away from their families, correct? This is classic grooming.
I don't know about that particular scenario, but there's a lot of grooming that goes on.
And the thing is this really started to pick up momentum back in the Clinton administration, and they have been trafficking children from Haiti for decades. And so what Trump is trying to do now is identify who the parents are, who the children are, and make sure that this is not a trafficking situation. Is that correct?
That's what it sounds like he's doing, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, this used to be a conservative state, but we have so many liberal Dems that have come in, and then rather than do their research and figure out what's going on, they just go ape shit over stuff they see in the news, not realizing that it's selected information to give them a particular mindset and belief system. And
Right,
so that's really frustrating, because when you are out and about on a daily basis, you can see it if you're paying attention.
right. Yeah.
Wow. So what can we do from here as regular citizens? What can we do when we see certain things, knowing that the police are involved a good portion of the time? Not all of them. Don't have a cow, folks. But in many instances, you've got police involved, judges, prosecutors. Our legal system is rife with child traffickers. What can we do to keep ourselves and our children safe?
Well, the biggest thing right now as a collective that we need to do is we need to understand that a lot of these officials have been blackmailed. A lot of them have been forced to make, to been put into these situations because they've been caught doing or even forced to do certain things that they don't want to do. And the biggest thing that we need to do right now as a collective is understand that, yes, there are people that have been blackmailed. What we need is we need to encourage people in a positive way to come forward and say, yes, I was blackmailed. This is who I was blackmailed by, and this is what I'm doing now to fix and to make up for what I did in the past. Because if we go at this with, pitchforks and torches, it's going to get bad really, really quick. We need to encourage the good people to come forward. We need to encourage the good people to be honest, and we need to encourage them to come to, make the right decisions.
I think you bring up a really excellent point there, because oftentimes these people that are blackmailed behind the scenes, they're being extorted financially. Their wives, their children, fiancés, what have you, whatever their family relations, parents, they're being threatened physically. So these politicians, these judges, these doctors, whatever their position of authority might be, they feel like they have no choice but to comply and do these heinous acts of pedophilia with these children. Otherwise, their family's going to die.
Right.
Correct?
Right, exactly. And these people have no qualms in killing those who don't fall in line. I've been in situations where, at least from what I heard, I did not see it explicitly, but I had overheard a situation where a prospective congressman was being blackmailed, told you're going to have sex with this child, otherwise we're going to kill you and your wife. He said no. Started sobbing, and very, very suddenly, very, very quickly, the sobbing started. His wife started screaming. I heard his wife get dragged off, and I heard her start getting raped. And the congressman, I don't remember explicitly who, but I remember that he was found a few days later dead. Or the prospective congressman. He wasn't actually a congressman. He was trying to run. And that's why they did it, was because he started running for Congress. And to make sure that he stayed under thumb, they went to blackmail him. And when he said no, they killed him.
Because they videotape these, and then they hold these videotapes over you. You'll pass this law, you'll do this, or else we'll take this to the media. And
Right.
obviously you don't want your disgusting behaviors put out there, especially
Right.
when they were blackmailed. My concern would be there's a difference in psychopathy of somebody who is doing this under duress and somebody who really enjoys that and has no problem with it. Those are the people I'm concerned about.
Right. When I talk about this, I say that there are more than two types of people, but there are mainly two types of people in this. There are those who did it with a tear in their eye, and those who did it with a smile on their face. And the ones with a smile on the face are disgusting to a whole different degree, to a whole different level. I've been to parties where they'll brag about the youngest they've been with, and they will compare the age, and they'll be like, oh, the youngest you were with was 6 months. Did they live through that? No, I didn't think so. Well, my youngest was 7 months and they lived through that one. And it's, that's how they talk about it. They brag about,
Wow. And you've lived to tell about it.
sort of.
Yeah, you know what? And I hate to couch it this way, but you're one of the lucky ones, not in that you went through that experience, but now hopefully you have an opportunity through your voice to educate the rest of us so that we can wake up and hopefully make some changes so this can stop.
I have a lot of guilt about surviving, because to survive, you have to do some things that you really don't want to do. But I'm just kind of living in the mindset now that I lived for a reason, and I need to make up for what I did in the past. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Do you really feel like you need to make up for something because you were forced into it? This
It
is
doesn't matter. I still could have let them kill me. I still could have, I could have let myself die, but I didn't. I still did things that I didn't want to do, and I survived. But, you know, not doing what I can to make up for it is just an insult to their memories. So
Do you feel like other survivors feel this way, or is this something special about your spirit that feels this way?
I can imagine there are a lot of survivors who feel this way.
Do you
Like,
have do you have
go
a
ahead.
support group? Do you have people that you can talk to where you guys can talk about those types of things in a safe environment?
I I do, but unfortunately, because of everything with Iris, I've had I don't want to use this term, but I have a degree of paranoia now that, like, I'm afraid that anybody who I talk to is actually working with CPS, and it's caused a lot of distress and a lot of problems, because I can tell that there are genuine people who are reaching out to try and help. But whenever I get a new email from somebody, my heart clenches up and it's like, are they working for CPS?
Right. But you have that lie detector inside of you that hopefully can be a very discerning gauge as to who you can talk to and who you should just instantly delete, correct?
And so far, so far it has been pretty good.
Good.
So far it's been pretty accurate, but I still get those times where I just, get into that point and I clam up. And so far people have been really, really understanding, and I will never be able to thank them enough, because they reach out and they try to be nice, but I recoil back, and they've been really, really wonderful.
Well, hopefully they understand your situation and the stress. Is there anything that you need from the viewers in terms of, do you need legal representation? Is there anything in particular that you and Scott could benefit from if somebody had that skill, that expertise, anything at all that hopefully somebody out there can say, I can provide this for you?
Honestly, I don't really know. I have no idea. The main focus that, Scott's main focus is getting Iris back.
Mhm.
Mine is making sure this doesn't happen to anybody ever again. I mean, of course, mine is getting Iris back as well, but by extension, I'm
Yeah.
focusing on making sure that this never happens to anybody ever again. And really, that's what I need from people. I need people to just build awareness, and to, if CPS gets involved with them or their friends, do not be afraid to reach out. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of parents in this country have had some sort of run-ins with CPS. Do not let CPS's involvement in your life cause you to clam up and be afraid um, or embarrassed. Don't let them do that. Be loud and build a support system by doing that. Because as when we come together is when they are not able to do anything.
When I was walking with my husband last night, we were talking about the interview that we were going to be doing today, and he mentioned about recording every incident that you possibly can. When they show up on your doorstep, you need to immediately start recording the interaction, because they do have such a horrible history of lying and falsifying records.
Well,
So it's really up to you to do that.
there is legal precedent for that as well. There is a case, Gilk versus Kniffy, where the Supreme, I believe it was the Supreme Court, ruled that public employees, because they are paid by your tax dollars, can be recorded. Everybody needs to record every single interaction you have with CPS. Do not hesitate. Do not let them say you do not have my permission to record. It doesn't matter. You are a public employee. My tax dollars are paying for you, and I'm going to record you and make sure you don't take my child.
And they need a warrant.
Yes. That apparently some states, they don't need a warrant. Here in Maryland, they didn't.
Are you serious?
When they came on April 6th, they came with the police. And apparently the paper that they had gives the police the authority to come into our house and take Iris even without a warrant.
That's incredible. You know, I had a situation several years ago where I had custody of a family member who came from a situation that was not the greatest. And so I was involved with Child Protective Services. We had done the walkthrough with the house to make sure everything was kosher. And then there was a facility that we were supposed to take her to in order to have counseling. Well, before they could start counseling, they wanted a copy of her birth certificate. That was part of the paperwork, is they wanted, this was in American Fork, Utah. I could dig up the name if anybody has questions, but they wanted a copy of her birth certificate. And for me, that was a red flag because I know what the birth certificate is about. So when they called me, there was a particular counselor who called me specifically and said, why haven't you brought this in? And, you know, asking questions. I put him on the grill. I told him, I said, I know what this is about. I know that you guys are trafficking children. I know if there's any questionable thing in your mind, you will take her, and now you've got her birth certificate, and here's what can happen. And did you know he said, you're right.
Really?
He said, you're right. And I said, I've got somebody else I'm taking her to in Salt Lake. I don't want to ever hear from you folks again. And they never bothered us, not one time.
Good.
So you have to call these people on the carpet. They don't want to be exposed. And when you're educated and you know what's going on, they back off.
Unfortunately, in my particular case, that caused them to fight even harder. When we were at the hospital, I asked the director there, I said, is this common? Is it common for them to fight, for them to try this hard to get a child? And she's like, we've never had anybody fight this hard before.
So I would imagine that it has a lot to do with your background then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is atypical. Gosh. Well, I thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure talking with you. And, you know, I hope that if somebody has something they can offer you, just let me know. You can reach me at galacticstoryteller@gmail.com. My website is .com. Let me know specifically that you want to offer something to Jen, and I will let her know, and she can be in charge of whether or not she wants to reach out to you, depending on what's going on. I would imagine there are so many balls in the air right now. It's difficult to get to all of it.
Yeah, but I'm trying really hard. I really appreciate everybody who's been reaching out, you know, and like I said, just do what you can to build awareness to the issue, because if they did this to me, you know, they've done this to other people as well. And it's only a matter of time until they try to do it to you.
Wow. And that is true. That is true, because children are big business. Sex is big business. Our organ harvesting, huge. It's bigger than drugs and arms. Is human trafficking. So we really have to put a stop to this. Well, it's been a great pleasure for me. Keep in touch, will you?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me on. It's great to finally see you and meet you and everything.
You as well. Tell Scott hello and give baby Iris a big hug tomorrow, correct? You have a meeting with her tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. I know you'll give her lots of love.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much. All
Thanks.
right, guys, that is a wrap. If you have any comments or questions, please do it with compassion and respect, like I asked earlier. These are very sensitive topics, and spread the word. Like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this information. You guys take care, and we will see you in the next video.